Hello, my name is Amir Kellan. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Integrated Studies in Education at McGill University. It's a pleasure to be in conversation with the ICC audience through this virtual presentation. Today I'm going to talk about ecological intercultural rhetoric. Intercultural rhetoric is an inspirational, but at the same time a problematic area in second language writing research. It is an influential field because it has reminded monolingual Anglophone writing teachers that rhetorical patterns and structures in English are not universal. English learners who read and write in other languages, including the mother tongues, already have a strong beliefs about good quality writing. When they write in English, they understandably employ the native rhetorical practices to guide their English medium writing. Consciousness about intercultural rhetoric exerts a significant impact on pedagogy. It helps teachers move beyond pedagogies that focus on lexical and syntactic choices to incorporate conversations about rhetoric, genre, and discourse into the teaching and learning process. Moreover, knowledge of intercultural rhetoric can transform assessment and feedback strategies. It will allow teachers to treat rhetorical differences as a welcome excuse to focus on intercultural competence rather than count those differences as errors. Nevertheless, since its very inception, intercultural rhetoric has been an apologetic field of study and frequently has tried to refine its insensitive conceptualizations, and with good reason. The initial theorizations of intercultural rhetoric by scholars such as Kaplan and Connor regarded the presence of non-English rhetorical tendencies in the process of learning writing as a problem that is caused by the interference of students' native rhetorical traditions. These earlier conceptualizations presumed that non-English cultures did not appreciate linearity of argument organization and the clarity it requires. As a result, dominant mentality of intercultural rhetoric problematically has been to diminish the presence of students' cultures to the extreme that it even advocated, according to Connor 1996, quote, "the need to think in English," unquote. This statement connotes a desire for the absence of the mother tongue and native rhetorical culture, even in the mind. This defective character of intercultural rhetoric has been discussed and critiqued profusely. A less discussed cause for intercultural rhetoric's repentant disposition is the fact that some of the American academic circles which established and developed the field were so textually isolated from the world's diverse writing traditions that they treated the fact that there were alternative communication styles and rhetorical patterns as a significant discovery. Rhetorical diversity is everyday knowledge for multilingual writers and part of collective intuition in multicultural societies with longer histories than settler colonial English-speaking nation-states such as the United States and Canada. The Anglo-American political and economic hegemony has created a cultural self-centeredness that, ironically, has led to ignorance of the existence of what they deem as lesser writing traditions. The expansionist writing ecosystem in which English-speaking scholars and language teachers mobilize their research and practice has indeed led them to regard any alternative treatment of text generation as a potential challenge, as a problem. Considering this epistemic shortcoming, the intercultural rhetoric subject matter, as well as understanding the rhetoric of the other, should also be the very nature of the English writing ecosystem, which has created strict genre regimes. What constitutes the English writing ecosystem includes more than rhetorical legacies and genre traditions. The English writing ecosystem is also formed by the Anglo-American commercial, administrative, and political apparatus, which requires certain genre practices to help it run. Contextualizing the English writing ecosystem in broader terms is significant. Think of a rhetorical feature such as linearity. Linearity is an appropriate example because it has been the prime preoccupation of contrastive and comparative rhetoricians. Linearity is often discussed as an inherent characteristic of Anglo-American culture. Discourses like linearity are in fact the outcome of political, economic, and administrative structures that can emerge from any other culture given the right circumstances. This perception of intercultural rhetoric has important pedagogical implications. Through this lens, educators can see that the genres that their students are often asked to engage with have in fact been constructed to help the administration of a hegemonic political and economic system, and that mastering dominant rhetorical practices often has little to do with a student's success or empowerment. I propose that viewing culture as an ecosystem with economic and political dynamics can open new horizons for understanding why people in cultures different from the hegemonic Anglo-American imperial network produce and employ different rhetorical patterns. I use the term Anglo-American here to refer to English-speaking populations in the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand as creators and sustainers of the hegemonic post-war economic and political system. Using ecology as a metaphor that allows us to regard writing as an ecosystem with complex connections and networks has already been established in the field of writing studies. For instance, Flinkstein writes, material artifacts and activities integral to the constitution of an ambient environment and the writers and texts within it are all germane to a writing ecosystem. Writing as an ecology privileges circular causality rather than linear cause and effect chains. Here, actions of the participants create in part the environment that in turn creates the participants. From this perspective, it is not only the writers who control rhetoric, and in the same manner, teachers and students. The writing environment also determines rhetoric. For instance, in a writing ecology, we constantly interact with socio-political and economic systems in which we mobilize writing for discursive maneuvering and for more power and benefit. The word ecology has long been used in writing studies in second language writing as well, with different meanings. For instance, in a literal sense, it has been used to mean writing about nature and the environment. It has been used to discuss the physical environment where the act of writing occurs, and it has been used in connection with multimodal and writing environments. Ecology has also been described as sociocultural contexts of writing. This concept in particular has attracted attention of scholars interested in intercultural rhetoric, and they have written about the importance of ecologies in intercultural rhetoric research. Although recognizing that the social context is an integral part of any writing ecology, I argue that we should move the curve that describes ecology beyond the social context to include economic, political, and administrative environments that impact rhetoric and genre formation. For this framing of ecological intercultural rhetoric, I borrow from the cultural analyses of critical theorists Horkheimer and Adorno. The definition of culture consciously includes economic and administrative elements that shape humans' cultural practices. Such a perspective challenges the dominant view of culture, which is viewed as having inherent human characteristics associated with ethnicity, race, and language. Here is how Adorno defines the culture industry. The culture industry fuses the old and familiar into a new quality. In all its branches, products which are tailored for consumption by masses and which to a great extent determine the nature of that consumption are manufactured more or less according to plan. The individual branches are similar in structure and at least fit into each other, ordering themselves into a system almost without a gap. This is made possible by contemporary technical capabilities as well as by economic and administrative concentration. The culture industry intentionally integrates its consumers from above. Borrowing from Adorno's terminology, we can more easily see how the construction of genres and rhetorical formats are planned by economic and administrative concentration for the goal of consumption by designated readerships. For instance, profit-making fiction for, in Adorno's words, masses, and report writing for evaluation by teachers, managers, and administrative committees. From this perspective, institutionalization, mechanization, industrialization, and monetization of text generation should be an important part of conversations about rhetoric and writing education in general. Political, economic, institutional, and administrative ecosystems regulate text production and distribution, the economics of book and journal industries, the politics of knowledge dissemination, the function of writing in institutional structures, the power relations between authors and audiences, and so on. Such dynamics can indeed impact rhetoric beyond the influence of culture as a set of human beliefs and practices. Let us see what this means when we think about the English writing ecosystem. Texts can be treated as economic products. They can be sold and bought, and rhetoric in such a transaction can turn into a marketing tool to maximize the appeal of a text to a particular audience. English texts, specifically, have an additional market value because of the dominance of English as a result of centuries of colonialism in its classic and neoliberal models. Especially in the latter period, the English-speaking world has turned culture, literature, and education, which are important venues of text generation, into profitable commodities. Based on the data from International Publishers Association, the Anglo-American text industry has the largest share of publishing profit in the world. It is not difficult to imagine that this industry has significantly impacted English rhetoric. This sophisticated business network regulates rhetoric in different forms. For instance, the academic publishing industry has created rules and regulations to make far-reaching dissemination of English texts possible. These standards for publishing have impacted Western academic rhetoric in different ways. They, for instance, determine target audiences, citation techniques, academic genres, word counts, abstract and keyword writing models, and even the research subject matter and methodological approaches. It is important to recognize that this complex economic, academic, and political network has significantly contributed to the formation of the linear structure that Kaplan called English rhetoric. English speakers do not write the way they do only because they have an inherent individual or collective cultural inclination to follow certain rhetorical practices, like, for instance, linearity. English rhetoric is also a practice that best fits the current socio-political and economic structures run and maintained by English speakers and the institutions that they run. English rhetoric, in this sense, is not merely a human-centered cultural phenomenon, but a component of ecological relations that run a dominant socioeconomic structure. This hegemon heavily regulates rhetoric through, for instance, standardizing formatting, length regulation, precise genre divisions, emphasis on punctuation, notions such as simplicity and clarity, prioritizing report writing, strict citation rules, and heavy copyright regimes. These writing practices are not essential properties of English rhetoric, but accidental features that help sustain imperial administrative structures. In Philipson's words, the global English project reinforces a political and military hegemony. Adopting a view of writing as an ecosystem and writing cultures as ecosystems with economic, administrative, and political ecological relations will have significant implications for practice. Dominant forms of intercultural rhetoric often invite teachers to reflect on a student's rhetorical legacies and to make those part of the teaching and learning process. Regarding rhetoric as a product of political, economic, and administrative ecosystems, we'll direct teachers to also reflect on their own positionality in those structures, their perceptions of effective writing, and the curricula and institutional prescriptions and regulations that they have their students follow. In other words, ecological intercultural rhetoric will shift the focus from students' mother tongues to comprehending the Anglo-American writing ecosystem as the main cause of the challenges involved in teaching ESL writing. Administrative, economic, and political structures in English-speaking countries are tightly rooted in expansionist, industrial, colonial, and neoliberal legacies that have significantly impacted educational policy and curriculum development. This history is part of everyday pedagogy, and writing teachers need to address it by identifying how it has shaped their expectations from students. Here are a few examples. Teachers need to ask why the curriculum prioritizes essayist literacy and report writing rather than human expression and rhetorical exploration. Why reporting in a hierarchical system should be the aim of writing education. Teachers should think about how the linearity of report writing prevents expressions of complex human emotions and experiences in order to sustain conformity and hierarchy. When teaching citation techniques, teachers need to be conscious of the fact that an overemphasis on intellectual property ownership is ideologically connected to capitalist and neoliberal discourses that view humans mainly as trading individuals and see little value in collective and communal knowledge building. Our understanding of the ecological power relations in this writing environment will help remind writing teachers that there is a lot of room in writing courses for genre, modality, tone, and rhetorical flexibility, which is often unexplored. Thank you very much for listening to my presentation. I look forward to engaging with your questions and comments, hopefully shortly.